Hey there, welcome into the world of Selenium. If you're going to embark on a journey of automation, I promise you this is the right place to start. So let me take you on the first lap of this journey. This is a video tutorial, What is Selenium from Simply Learn. What is in it for you? Before you start understanding any automation tool, it's good to look back into what manual testing is all about, what are its challenges, and how an automation tool overcomes these challenges. Challenges are always overcome by inventing something new. So let's see how Selenium came into existence and how did it evolve to become one of the most popular web application automation tool. Selenium suite of tools. Selenium is not a single tool. It has multiple components and we will be looking into each of them. As you know, every automation tool has its own advantages and limitations. So we will be understanding the advantages and limitations of Selenium and how do we work around it. Selenium jobs and salary. Very important, isn't it? You are here to learn Selenium. You definitely want to know what's the market demand on this skill, what worth you will be once you are skilled on this automation tool. So what we will do, we'll just discuss some stats on the job market related to test automation and Selenium in particular. Alright, so let's get started. Manual testing and its challenges. What is manual testing? Manual testing mainly involves physical execution of test cases against various applications and to do what? To detect bugs and errors. So as a definition, if you can say, it is one of the primitive methods of testing a software. Execution of test cases without using any automation tools. It does not require the knowledge of any automation tools and can practically test any application. This could be as simple a definition can be. Let's do one thing. Let's take an example, right? Before we start understanding what are the challenges of manual testing and why we have to really look into any automation tools, let's take a simple example. Say we have a simple use case. As a user, I want to log into my web application using username and password. A very common use case, isn't it? And this is a common use case for any kind of web application under test. Now let's say, for example, I have a web application here. Say I have this community.simplylearn.com. For me to actually enter into this application, what I need to do is first log in into this application. So this is a simple login page which accepts a user ID or an email ID, a password, and you click on the login. Now as a tester, you would write multiple test cases to test this use case. For example, you will have multiple data test cases like valid credentials, invalid credentials, null value, and so on. You will also test multiple links on this page, probably the forget password link, the sign up now. So whatever links are made available, you're going to test that. Then you will say test this checkbox. So you will check the remember me functionality, and when you log in back again, you want to validate if all your previous data are filled up. You will also check for error messages on an invalid login. You will do accessibility testing. You will also do a performance on this page. Like say for example, response time after you click on login button and so on. So while you're doing a manual testing, literally you can do any kind of test you want. So this is what you do in the first place. And then you start executing these test cases one by one. You will find bugs, your developers are going to fix them, and you will need to rerun all these test cases again and again until all your bugs are fixed and your application is ready to ship. Now this is a very simple use case. Now let's look at a little complex use case now. Say you have an account creation form like this. So I have this online PAN application form, right? This is still a simpler form, I would say. Now look at the amount of data you need to fill here. Each and every field you need to test, and you need to test this with hundreds of transactions because you're going to have those kind of data sets with you, and then you're going to repeat them again and again until you are satisfied that your application is working as per it is designed. So now if you go back to our presentation, now this brings us to the first demerit of the manual testing, and what it is, this is very time consuming process and hence it's going to get very boring for any manual tester. Also, it is more error prone. The risk of error is pretty high. Why? Because it is done manually and human mistakes are bound to happen. It requires presence of tester all the time. Since it's manual execution, tester's presence is required all the time. One needs to keep doing manual steps over and over again, and hence he needs to be sitting in front of his PC. Manual creation of logs and repositories. Creating manual reports. Grouping them. Formatting them so that they are like a good looking reports. Sending those reports manually to all the stakeholders. Say collecting logs from the various machines after you execute the test cases. Consolidating all those results and logs, right? Creating repositories, maintaining them. Wow. This is a huge long list of mundane tasks one needs to do. And this you need to do again and again until your testing is completed, right? So this is going to be a manual process and it's going to be very tedious. And as I said, it is also error prone. Limited scope. The scope of manual testing is very limited. For example, say regression testing. Ideally, you would want to run all the test cases which you have written, but since it's a manual process, you would not have the luxury of time to execute all of them. And hence what you do, you will pick up, choose your test cases and then execute. That way you are kind of limiting the scope of testing. Also, say working with large amount of data, which is manually pretty impractical. What about performance testing? So you want to say collect certain metrics on various performance measures as a part of your performance testing. You want to simulate certain multiple loads on your application which is under test. Hence, performing this manually is definitely not feasible. And to top it all this, say you're working in an agile model where your code is being churned out by developers, say every week. Testers are building their test and they're executing them as and when the builds are made available to them for testing. Now this happens iteratively and hence you will need to run all the test cases which you have created multiple times during your development process. And doing this manually is going to become definitely very tedious and boring. And is this really an effective way of doing it? Not at all. So what do? We automate it. So this tells us why we want to automate. One is for the faster execution. Two, to be less error prone. And the most importantly, to help you run your test cases frequently, as many times as you want. So there were many tools available in the market today for automation. So one such tool is Selenium. Advent of Selenium. Much before Selenium, there were various tools in the market like RFT, QTP, just to name a few popular ones. Selenium was introduced by a gentleman called Jason Huggins way back in 2004. He was an engineer at ThoughtWorks. He was working on a web application which needed frequent testing and he realized the inefficiency in manual testing his application repeatedly. So what he did was he wrote a JavaScript program that automatically controlled the browser actions and he named it as JavaScript Test Runner. He also made this open source which later was renamed as Selenium Core. And this is how Selenium came into existence. Since then, Selenium has become one of the most powerful tools to test web applications. So what is Selenium? Selenium is the most popular and widely used automation tool for automating your web application. It enables us to test web application on all kind of browsers like IE, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, Opera, and even the headless browser. Selenium is an open source and it's platform independent. The biggest reason why people are preferring this tool is because it is free of cost, whereas the QTP and RFT, which I mentioned earlier, are the chargeable tools. Selenium is also a set of tools and libraries to facilitate automation of web application. It is not a single tool. It has multiple components in it, which we will be seeing in detail in some time. And all these tools together, they help us test the web application. You can run Selenium scripts on any platform. It is platform independent. And why it is platform independent? Because it is developed in JavaScript. It's very common for manual testers not to have in-depth programming knowledge. So the Selenium has a record and replay back capability, and this tool is called as Selenium IDE, which can be used to create a set of actions as a script and then you just have to replay that script. So mainly this is used for demo purposes because Selenium itself is such a powerful tool and it offers so rich functionality, you would want to be in a position to take the advantage of all its features. However, if you have testers who do not have enough of programming knowledge to start with, there is still this IDE, which is a record replay tool, which you can use to create your test scripts. It also provides support for different programming languages like Java, Python, C#, Ruby, and so on. So you can literally write your test scripts in any language you like or which you know of. So one need not again know a complete in-depth or an advanced knowledge of any of these languages. Selenium supports different operating systems and browsers. It supports Windows, Macs, Linux, and say if you want to run your test on Ubuntu machines, yes, that is also possible. It's on any platform of your choice, Selenium, you can run the test cases. Selenium suite of tools. So now let's go a little more deeper into the Selenium. So as I said, it is a suite of tools. And these are the major components of the Selenium. Selenium IDE, Selenium Remote Control, which is in short called as RC, Selenium WebDriver, and Selenium Grid. From Selenium 3.0 version onwards, you will not find the remote control anymore because it has been deprecated. But you still have your IDE, WebDriver and grid components. Now let's take a deeper look into each of these components and understand how they function in this suite of tools. Selenium Integrated Development Environment, which is called as Selenium IDE. So it is the most simplest tool in the suite of Selenium. It's an integrated development environment. It has a record and playback functionality and it's a very simple and easy to use tool. However, it is mainly used as a prototyping and not used for creating the actual automation for your real-time projects. Why? Because of its own limitations, since it's just a record and replay tool. So this IDE is available as a Firefox plugin and a Chrome extension. So either you can use Firefox or the Chrome browser to record your test scripts. The commands created in the scripts where you are going to record these commands are called Selenium commands, and these are the commands which interact with your browser. You can also write some of these commands manually while you're recording your scripts, and we'll see how to do that when we talk about the IDE in detail. And it is again a platform independent, so you can deploy IDE on any platform of your choice. So you can have it on your Windows, Linux and Mac OS. However, the only requirement is you should have either Chrome or Firefox browser support on that particular platform. Earlier, Selenium IDE was only a Firefox extension. It died with the Firefox version 54 or 55, I guess. So IDE was not supported from the 55 version onwards, and this was sometime during 2017. However, very recently, all new brand Selenium IDE has been launched by Apply Tools, and they have made it cross-browser. That is, it is available both on Chrome and Firefox now. So you can install this extension as a Chrome extension or as an add-on on your Firefox browser. It's a completely revamped version which was done by Apply Tools. They literally rewrote the complete code, and now they have made it available on the GitHub under the Apache 2.0 license. And it also comes with many new features now, like reusability of test cases. It has a better debugging technology now, and most importantly, it supports parallel test execution. It has introduced an utility called Selenium Side Runner that allows your test cases to run on any browser. So you can create your automation using your IDE on Chrome or Firefox. However, through this Side Runner, from your command prompt, you can execute any of your test cases on any browser of your choice, and thus by achieving your cross-browser testing. You can also run parallel testing using Grid without writing any specific code to do this. Again, this can be done using the Selenium Side Runner and having the Grid installation done. So let's look at how IDE looks like and what are its components are and how do we work with IDE. Let's go to the Firefox browser now and launch the IDE and see how the IDE looks. So let me go to my Firefox. Now on this browser, if you can see here, there is an icon here which says Selenium IDE, and this appears after you go ahead and install the Selenium IDE plugin. So now I'll just go click on this, and then I already have a project created. So this is the IDE window which gets opened for me. I have a pre-recorded script here, and what the script does is I just open Amazon.in website and I am searching for the product iPhone. Also, I have an assertion statement here which asserts for the web page title, and then I'm closing the browser. So let's first execute the script and see how it works, and then we will get into the details of what are the different components available on this IDE. So for me to execute, what I will do is IDE has a very beautiful feature here to control the speed of the execution. So what I'll do is I'll reduce the speed a little bit so that you should be able to see the complete execution step by step. Now to execute the script, I'll just go here and say run current test. So this opens the Firefox window and the Amazon.in website. It should search for iPhone product now. Then it is going to do the title assertion and close the browser. So if you look here, all the statements look in green now. So that means every step has been executed successfully and there are no errors. So now let's look at the components of this IDE. So the first component which you need to understand is how do you record the test. So there is a start recording button made available to you, clicking on which you can launch any website of the application under test and you can start recording your steps. And once you have recorded, you can use this play button, which is nothing but your run current test button, to execute your test. So if you want to execute multiple tests, then you have an option to do so here, which says run all tests. This particular window, what you're seeing here, right? So this is the window where you have all your commands, which gets recorded when you record your script. And these are pretty simple commands and they're very self-explanatory. Like say for example, open. So it says open and the target is Amazon.in. That means it is giving instruction to your browser to open this particular website. Setting the window size. Clicking on a button. So this is the search button which we have. And then typing what is the product which you're searching for. And then you have multiple assert statements made available to you in this IDE. So these are all called as the Selenium command and as simple as a close browser command. And now if you look here in this window, there is this log window. So every step which gets executed here, there is a log generated showing you the status of the execution of that step. So if at all there is a failure, you would see a red failed mark against that particular step. And the test case will not say completed successfully, it will say the failure occurred. Okay, so it is very simple and very user-friendly kind of an IDE. So let's go back to our presentation. So we saw the play button here and we saw how to record it. I also showed you the commands, the command window what we have. So these are the Selenium commands. And then we saw the log which indicated the execution of each of this command. Now saving the script. So let me go back to the IDE again. So once you have created your test scripts, you have run it successfully, you need to save your project. So for you to save the project, when you click on the save project, every IDE project, it is saved with an extension .sid, which is nothing but Selenium ID. So you just go ahead and click on save. Since I've already saved this project, I'm going to just say cancel. So that's the file extension it uses to save your project. For more details on how to use IDE, you can watch our video on Selenium IDE on simplylearn.com. Selenium RC. This is Selenium Remote Control. So this was developed by Paul Hammond and he refactored the code and was also credited with Jason as a co-creator of Selenium. RC is used to write web application tests in different programming language. The server itself is written in Java language. It supports multiple programming languages like Java, C#, Perl, Python and PHP. It interacts with the browser with the help of RC server. It uses a simple HTTP GET and POST request for communication. This RC server is also a Selenium 1.0 version, but it got deprecated in Selenium 2.0 and was completely removed in 3.0 and it got replaced by Selenium WebDriver. We will see why this happened when we talk about the Selenium WebDriver. This is the architecture of Selenium Remote Control. So when Jason Huggins introduced Selenium, the tool was JavaScript program and he called it as JavaScript Test Runner, and it is also called as Selenium Core. So every HTML has these JavaScript statements which are executed by this web browser. There is a JavaScript engine which helps in executing this command. Now this had a major issue of something called as same origin policy. Now what is the same origin policy? Same origin policy prohibits your JavaScript from accessing elements or interacting with the scripts from the domain different from where it is launched. And this was for the security measure. For example, every web page in say google.com domain, like say your search, email, Google Drive can be accessible, but nothing outside this domain, like say if you want to access Yahoo or an Amazon, that was not possible due to security reasons obviously. So the testers had to install the Selenium core and the web server which contained your web application which you are basically testing on the same system, and this was not feasible and effective all the time. Now to overcome this, to overcome the same origin policy, what Paul Hammond did was he created something called as this remote server, which is Selenium Remote Control Server, and it acted like a proxy to trick the browser in believing that your core, which is your Selenium core, and your web application under test are on the same domain. Thus by eliminating your same origin policy. And this was called as your Selenium Remote Control, which was the version 1 of Selenium. Now, if you look at the simple architecture of this, what are the things it has? So one is your script, right? First, you need to write your scripts using any supported language, like say PHP, Java, Python, and Ruby, as I mentioned. Now, before we start the testing, what is the requirement of the Selenium 1 version is you need to install the RC server. Now, this RC server is a separate application. So once you install this Selenium server is responsible for receiving the Selenium commands. Now these are the Selenium commands which you have written in your scripts. It interprets them and it executes it on your browser, and the results are sent back to your test scripts. And this browser interaction happens only through this RC server. Again, as I said, using a simple HTTP GET and POST request to communicate. Now upon receiving these instructions, right, from the Selenium core, the response is sent back to this RC server from your browser and back to your test scripts. So the cycle starts from your test scripts, The Selenium commands are interpreted by your RC server. Those are sent to the browser, and it's a simple JavaScript which executed on your browser, and the results after the execution are sent back to your test scripts through your RC server. This is a simple cycle. Now this cycle is repeated for every command written in your test script until your complete test case is executed. Okay, so this is how the RC worked. Now this RC had few shortcomings, and what are those? One is the architecture of this RC itself was complicated. Why? Because of this intermediate RC server which we have between the browser and your test script, and this RC server had to be installed before running any test scripts. So that means this became an additional setup, and it acts as a mediator between your Selenium commands and your browser. Also, the execution of commands takes a very long time. It is pretty slow. Why? Because every command, it needs to make a full trip from your test script to your RC server, to the core and to the browser, execute the script, and then again back in the same line, which makes your overall test execution very slow. And now because of this shortfalls, WebDriver was introduced. So Selenium WebDriver. Selenium WebDrivers were introduced by a gentleman called Simon Stewart, and it was developed in the year 2006. It is the first cross-platform testing framework. It is a programming interface to create and run test cases. It makes provision to act on web elements. So basically there are multiple locating techniques which Selenium WebDriver provides us for finding those elements and to perform operations on those web elements. WebDriver does not require a core engine like RC, and it interacts natively with the browser application. So there is a direct interaction with your browser application, and it eliminates the need of having that intermediate RC server. And that makes the architecture pretty simple. This WebDriver, again, it supports multiple languages, which we already talked about, and also it has integration with multiple frameworks. So once you understand how the WebDriver works, what are its functionalities and what are its drawbacks, you will appreciate the fact that, so how does Selenium WebDriver overcomes this? Even in WebDriver, we have test scripts, we also have a web browser here, and then we have a WebDriver. However, what we do not have this additional server which RC required, and this makes the architecture of the WebDriver simpler. The browser is controlled directly from the operating system level. Now, due to this direct communication, the speed of test execution is much faster than RC. Now, how does this WebDriver work? So we have something called as client libraries or the language bindings. So we know now that Selenium supports multiple languages, and you're free to use any supported language to create your automation script. And where are these libraries available? So if you go to seleniumhq.org, so let me go to the browser and show you that. So in the seleniumhq.org, if you go to the downloads, so here you will see something called as Selenium client and WebDriver language binding. And depending on the language which you want to work with or which you want to create test scripts with, you can download these client libraries. So if you're working with Java, download the client library for Java. So if you're working with Python, you have a corresponding link through which you can download your client libraries. And then Selenium provides a lot of APIs for us to interact with the browser, and these are called as the REST APIs. So then we have the browser drivers through which we interact with the browser. Now, what are these browser drivers? So there are drivers specific to each browser. So let me show you that on our seleniumhq.org. So here, if you just scroll down, you have something called as third-party drivers, bindings, and plugins. For every supported browser of Selenium, you have a corresponding driver file available. Now, say for example, if you want to work with Firefox, Mozilla Gecko driver is what you need to download. And these driver files, so if you go and click here, you will get an executable driver file for any of the platforms which you're working. So if you're working on Windows, Mac OS or Linux, you can just download the corresponding driver files here. So these drivers, see, these driver files are the ones which interact with the actual browser. And how does this happen? This driver establishes the connection with the real browser without revealing the internal logic of the browser functionality. Now, what does that mean? Say we want to execute a test script. And how does this test script gets executed? First is it sends an HTTP request which is generated and sent to this browser driver which we just saw for each of the command in your scripts. And then this driver receives the request through your HTTP server. And this HTTP server does all the execution directly on the browser. And then the execution status, the complete status, is sent back to your test script. So let me show you a simple use case how it works with the WebDriver. So for that, let's go to my Eclipse here. So I already have a test script written here in WebDriver, and what this basically does is it launches Amazon.com, Amazon.in website. It uses the Firefox browser, and then I'm also fetching the page title and printing it on the console. And then I'm closing the browser. This is a simple functionality which I'm doing here. So if you look here, so the Eclipse is the IDE which I'm using. I've already installed Selenium here, and I've written a simple Java class. And this Java class, we have multiple methods. One is to launch browser, one is to fetch the title of the page, and one is to close the browser. Now while launching the browser, I said every browser has its own driver files. So somewhere in this Java class, I need to tell Selenium as which browser to use. And how is that done? That is done by these first two statements here, where I'm doing a system.set property and where I'm indicating that this is my driver file, which is the Gecko driver, to be used. And using this, I want the Selenium to launch the Firefox browser. And after this, all the operations, any operations which you want to perform on your web application under test, you can do it here. Now let's go ahead and execute this and see how it works. So simply what I need to do is I'll just say execute this as a Java program. So the Firefox browser is getting launched. So you can see Amazon.in being launched here. And since we are not doing any operations here, what I'm simply doing is printing the title of the page and closing the browser. That is it. So if you see here, you can see the page title is online shopping site so and so. And this is what I'm printing through this method, which is fetch page title. A very simple way of writing a automation script using WebDriver. So now you saw how we write a small test script using the WebDriver function. Now say if I want to run the script on multiple browsers and on multiple operating systems, and I do not have just one test case. I say I've got hundreds of test cases. Now with this approach, what you can achieve to your best is you can sequentially execute on every browser available and all your 100 or 200 test cases, whatever you have. Now this is going to take quite a long time to execute, and hence to reduce the time taken for the execution, Selenium has something called as grid. Selenium grid. The main objective of the grid is to minimize your test execution time. This grid is designed to distribute commands to different machines simultaneously. In real-time environment, you always have the need to run test cases in a distributed environment. For example, a web application for which say you have automated thousands of test cases and you want to run them as a regression suite across multiple browsers and OS. What you need to do is you need to run them parallelly and not really sequentially. So grid allows this parallel execution of tests on different browsers and operating systems. You also want an integration with reporting tools so that you can get a consolidated report after the tests have been executed on multiple machines. So grid can be integrated with such many other tools. How does the grid work? So grid has this hub and node concept which helps in achieving the parallel execution. Let's take an example. Say again your application supports all browsers and it also supports different OS like the one which you're seeing here, like Windows, Mac and Linux, and your requirement is to run tests on all the supported browsers and operating systems like this one. So what you do here is you configure a master machine, that is this, which is also called as hub, by running something called as Selenium standalone server. And this Selenium standalone server can be downloaded from your Selenium HQ website. So let me show you that. Let's go to my browser, and in the downloads here, if you see Selenium standalone server version 3.1.4.59, and this is what you need to download. So using the server, you create a hub configuration like this. Once you do this, you also need to create nodes specific to your requirement, like a Windows 10, like a Mac machine with Firefox, with a Windows 8 with a Chrome, and Mac say with Safari browser. And the node configuration is also done using the same server, which is the Selenium standalone server. So you create a node configuration on this node machines. So once you have the setup created, through your master, that is your hub, you can control on which nodes you want to execute which test. Say for example here, say you want to run some test on your Mac machine with Safari browser only. So you have a kind of smoke test which you need to run. Now through the master, you can control this complete execution. So what master does it selects this particular node depending on the configuration which you have set on the master machine. Also you could have multiple possible combinations, like say I want to just run smoke test on all my nodes. I want to run specific component test on say only Windows 10 with an Edge browser. Or I can say I want to just run my complete regression suite but only on Mac machine, and so on. And all this is controlled through your master. So what happens on the node? Once it gets the command from the master, the node actually runs the specified test on the browser. So you can check out our detailed video on Selenium Grid for you to understand how the grid works and how do we do this configuration and execute the test. To summarize the Selenium versions, Selenium version 1 comprised of an IDE, RC and grid. As we discussed earlier, RC was on its path of deprecation and WebDriver was taking birth. So Selenium 2 had an earlier version of WebDriver and also RC existed. From 3.0 onwards, RC was completely removed and WebDriver took its place. Also, there's a 4. version around the corner. It has more features and enhancements. So some of the features which is expected are like W3C WebDriver standardization. They have an improved IDE and also I believe there are some improvements done to the grid. Advantages of Selenium: speed and accuracy. Since there is no manual execution, your test can run faster, and with grid, it helps in parallel execution. So you can actually execute large volume of test cases within a short frame. For example, let's say before your release of product, during your last lap of testing, you find a bug and it has to be fixed. So the developer fixes the bug, and what you want to do is you want to run all the test cases pertaining to that area. Can you imagine the amount of time which will be required if you have to do this manually? But by automation, you can achieve this in a short duration of time, and you can also enable releasing your product in time and with less or no human error. The second advantage is it's an open source, so it's available free of cost and anyone can download and start using it. Supports a wide spectrum of programming languages. It is not restricted to any particular programming language. Whatever language you are comfortable with, you have an option to use that and to write your Selenium scripts. Selenium has support for almost all browsers and operating systems, including a headless browser. So this helps you to create test cases once and run them across all browsers and operating systems, and thus saving your time from manual execution. It also helps in achieving a broad test coverage. It's a pretty easy to use tool. You can check out all our videos and you can just master the skill of writing automation scripts. Reusability and add-ons. Of course, like any programming languages, it provides you a mechanism to reuse your code and avoid redundancy. Limitations. So like any other tool, Selenium also has certain limitations. So let's look at what they are and see if there are any workarounds also. Since Selenium is an open source, you do not have much technical support available. However, there are loads of documentation, materials, forums available which you can refer to. This tool is for automating web application. It cannot handle mobile application or desktop application automation. However, what Selenium provides is a support for integrating tools like APM tool for mobile testing. Selenium is not very good with image testing, since especially it is designed for web application automation. But then we again have many other tools which can be integrated with Selenium, like AutoIt and Securely. Selenium again has a limited reporting capability. It can help create basic reports, but we definitely need more. So it provides supports for tools like TestNG, ReportNG, Extent reports, which you can integrate and generate beautiful reports. Powerful, isn't it? Of course, it does not have a test management capability. A tool need not have all these capabilities. But again, you can integrate with the test management tool used in your organization. Since Selenium supports multiple programming language, the developer of the automation script need to have some basic knowledge of any programming language to write effective automation scripts. Of course, a deep advanced knowledge is not required. A basic knowledge is more than sufficient. So if you look at all this, Selenium still provides a complete solution for your automation need. And that's the beauty of Selenium. And that is what makes it the most popular tool today for automation. Selenium jobs and salary, a very interesting topic. So the market trends for test automation are continuously changing, and Selenium has seen an exponential growth in a very short time period. This Selenium makes it convenient for clients to receive an ROI much faster. And how does that happen? By reducing the number of test cycles involved in testing their product. In present scenario, Selenium is a perfect automation for any of your web application testing and automated web application testing. And it is the first choice of your automation tester as well as the companies also. So as the softwares are becoming more and more complex, so is the test automation. And Selenium is a key skill set for any test automation engineer to have. But of course, it's not the only skill set one needs to have. So if you look at a typical job description here, so gone are the days when the engineers were hired as a manual tester. Every company today wants to hire engineers who knows how to do automation. And since Selenium is the most popular web application automation tool, companies look specifically for Selenium automation engineers. And this is the typical job description of any automation engineer. To develop test cases to detect bugs and errors. Automation framework designing. It's not just about automating your test cases. One should have the ability to design the complete framework related to the project. To improve and automate test practices. To participate in communicating best practices, defining test strategy, test manuals for tracking and fixing your software issues. Let's look at the compensation part of it. So compensation varies from company to company, and it also depends on your experience level. So according to the stats, if you look at the US market, it can vary anywhere from $21,000 to $150,000. Average could be, of course, somewhere around $90,000. And if you look at the Indian market range, it ranges anywhere from 2 to 10 lakhs per annum for a startup, with an average of 5 lakhs. So the more and more you're going to get experience, the better is going to be a compensation package. And the market has always been very lucrative for automation engineers. So since Selenium is so powerful web automation tools, there are some of the top end companies who use Selenium in their various projects. They want to provide their customers the best quality software and help them reduce the time to market, and hence they go in for Selenium. So a lot of these companies have Selenium deployments. Key takeaways. So far in this video, we looked at what are the disadvantages of manual testing, how Selenium helps us. Though Selenium is a powerful automation tool, it has its own limitations. So we looked at what those limitations are and how do we work around that. And then we definitely dwelt into what the compensation packages of automation engineer is, what is the job role, and which are those big companies who are deploying the Selenium today. So we are towards the end of the video now. I hope you enjoyed looking at this video. Thank you very much, and do subscribe to simplylearn.com. Thank you.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simply Learn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.